Planning Commission to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As you know, we have a safety alert in progress. City Hall is closed except by appointment, I believe.
That's correct.
To anybody who doesn't work. So what we're doing is we have the public is available to an online meeting, and or they can send emails in, which will be.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Okay.
Can you mute them?
So the city is doing everything we can to help prevent the spread of COVID.
There we go. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dixon?
Here.
Commissioner Cruciat?
Here.
Commissioner Walker?
Here.
Vice Chair Paahana? Here. Chair Mendoza?
Here.
All present?
These proceedings may be viewed on demand at the City of 29 Palms website at www.29palms.org. You may also live stream this meeting by going to the city website and clicking on the meeting agendas link. Public comments. This is the time for the public to address the Planning Commission on issues within jurisdiction of the Commission that are not on this agenda. All comments are redirected to the Chairman of the Commission and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. There is a time limitation of 3 minutes per person. If you haven't already done so, please fill out name and address slips and give them to the Planning Commission Secretary. The Planning Commission is prohibited by the Brown Act from taking action or discussing at length items not included on the printed agenda. Public comments on specific agenda items will be deferred until consideration of the item on the agenda. Have we received any requests for public comments via email? No. Okay. Commission comments, reports of meetings attended. Jim, we'll start with you.
I attended no meetings since our last meeting.
Leslie?
I have not attended any meetings since our last, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Max?
I haven't attended any meetings since our last meeting.
Jason?
I have not attended any meetings as well. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes. I have not attended any meetings either. I'm glad everybody made it through the holidays safely. And keep your fingers crossed that tomorrow goes well. Okay. Consent calendar. Approval of the Planning Commission meeting minutes from November 17th, 2020, and the December 1st meeting of 2020. Do we want to do those separately or combined?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Are there any questions, deletions, additions to either set of minutes? I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes for November 17th and December 1 as read.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dixon?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruciat?
Aye.
Commissioner Walker?
Aye.
Vice Chair Paahana?
Aye.
Chair Mendoza?
Aye.
5-0 approved.
Okay. We have no items removed from the consent calendar. So we'll move into public hearings. Appeal of vacation home rental, VHR permit number 144. And I'll turn this over to Travis.
Mr. Chairman, Diane Olson will present the case.
Good evening, Commissioners. This item is for an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to approve a vacation home rental. The VHR applicant is Andrew Gast, and the appellant to the VHR is Kyoko Allen. The property is located at 72133 El Paseo Drive. It's a 0.1 acre property, and the property is zoned RS4, which is residential, 4 dwelling units per acre. This is a map of the project location. This is the VHR location, and then the property to the east is the appellant's location. This is a picture of the VHR location. Another picture of the location. The appellant has cited the following reasons as basis for the appeal. There have been previous incidents of property damage, drug use, loud music, and parties. All of these incidents have occurred prior to the current property owner, the VHR applicant, owning the property. So they're not related to the proposed use of the property as VHR. There have been no complaints to the Code Enforcement Division or to the Sheriff's Department regarding any issues at this property in the last 6 months. The VHR applicant has submitted all the required documents for their application. The safety inspection has been performed by Building and Safety and has been completed, and therefore the applicant is in compliance with all the requirements for the VHR permit. If there are any issues at the location of the VHR, the city has the option to cite the applicant for those violations, to not issue a renewal for the VHR based on the violations, or to revoke the permit, the VHR permit, based on the violations. Therefore, staff's recommendation is to deny the application for appeal and approve the application for the vacation home rental. And that concludes the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Any questions for staff?
The home was recently sold?
Yes, the new owner bought it in November.
Oh, in November, okay. And that's why within the last 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe both the applicant and the appellant are on the property.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, when I open the hearing. Any other questions of staff? Okay, I'm going to open this, or the hearing, to the public, and I would ask the appellant to speak first.
Hi there, my name is Michael Allen. I am a tenant in common of the property, which is in, next door to the VHR permit. I've been a resident here of 29 Palms since 1977. I know this property next door as all the present or past tenant. And I think the report from the young lady who was on the phone is very short-sighted, because I know the history of that property since 1977. I'll tell you right now, if you go back and do research in there, you'll find that property has a very long history and some criminal issues. The last family that owned the property recently sold. They were probably the most the quiet and reserved folks. We really enjoyed having them as neighbors. But prior to their ownership, the property was owned by other folks that rented out the property. They had numerous complaints between property damage, life being threatened, motorcycles, hot rods, you name it. It was actually pretty bad. I understand that has no influence as to how the current owner may manage a property, but there's a lot of questions that need to be considered. Questions as to how the future tenants will be vetted. Is there is there any background research for criminal activity? Is there other things in consideration in terms of house rules and so forth? And I don't hear any consideration for that. So can that be reviewed or at least commented by the Andrew Gast?
If he chooses to.
First, I just want to say thank you to the entire Planning Commission, everyone here, and also Michael and Sorry, I didn't really have anything prepared, but first, I think it's really understandable, people's reservation, at least I understand it, when you hear that there's going to be a vacation home rental property, because if anything, to some it can be a big mixed bag. You have no way to know like what that really means. Just a few kind of assurances. One is, above everything else, my wife and I and my son, we plan to live there part of the year, and the other parts of the year rent it out. So first, we want to be a good neighbor. I know you mentioned that over the last 40 years, you've had a lot of horrible neighbors doing a lot of things, and both kind of like my religious background and my own just personality, I would hate to be a person that's inflicting, because of who I'm selecting or what I'm doing, like how do you say, being a bad neighbor. As far as your question about different kind of protocols and things in place, one is that I do plan to be pretty selective, both of how we're setting up the short-term rental. One thing is that we, I think at minimum, and I think this works along with, I believe, 29 Palms requirements, that I think it has to be at minimum a 2-day or 3-day rental. That already kind of puts aside a little bit of the people that are just want to come and party overnight, or come for a specific whatever, like a birthday party or something. So one thing is that there's going to be a minimum of either 2 nights or 3 nights for rental. So that helps a little bit. Another thing is just look at the best practices of other responsible people that have short-term rentals, like in 29 Palms and other areas. Is it just a straight rule that no parties? For instance, if the house, if the occupancy is either 6 or 7 people, those are the people that can be on the premises. There can't be other people coming for any kind of parties. There's no allowed music. Of course, people are inside the house during the day, might listen to music at a reasonable level. They might be recreating outside, but there can't be any loud music or any parties or anything. Those are just like the broad brushes, broad stroke kind of brushes that I have in place. One thing kind of thinking about and looking at the letter from your mother, having a bad neighbor can be a big impediment to your life. It can, well, I don't know, it can be very frustrating. It can be a constant annoyance. I've had neighbors that are bad neighbors, and I just wouldn't want that to happen to anyone. One thing, knowing about, even though this is new to me, just the short-term rental process and everything that's involved, I think that it allows for more mechanisms to have less of a possibility of what your mother or your family has experienced over the last 40 years. I think often when someone rents out a house, whether the owner is local or otherwise, sometimes you have people that are just kind of absentee landlords, and they don't reign over the activities, and they're just not good kind of stewards of their own property, and as far as controlling what's going on at the house. The difference with short-term rentals is that there's a lot of mechanisms in place where, besides my own conviction of being a good neighbor, that the mechanisms in place really incentivize the fact for me to be a good actor in the situation. For instance, the city of 29 Palms, in very short order, if they have substantive information that there's like loud parties or there's valid complaints, all of a sudden, I should know this a little bit more, I assume that maybe there's one warning, but very quickly goes to fines, and then they can just revoke me being a short-term rental. So I have a vested interest in controlling what's happening. I believe even people have an avenue of going directly to whatever platform. For instance, I'm going to be using Airbnb. Again, if someone has substantive complaints, they can go to Airbnb, and then Airbnb can just remove you of being a host. So all those things being said, I think that should be like hopefully some additional reassurance that you just won't have someone that's completely kind of absentee or just unresponsive. Like I believe there's a requirement for a sign in front of the property. I don't know what letter went out, but I think you and your mother might already have my phone number. If not, in the process, you're going to have my direct phone number. So you'll have a direct access to me if there's any kind of complaints. And I'm very reasonable, and I just want to make sure that the only way that long-term this is a good solution for my family's life and everything is that all parties have a good experience. The people staying at the house have a good experience, but also my neighbors and the community at large. So I hope that alleviates any kind of fears.
I'm glad you mentioned about Airbnb. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I recently won a lawsuit against Airbnb. It was actually settled out of court, but exact same parameters were discussed at court, and the reality is that you're not physically on the premise when these tenants are occupying the property. Your neighbors, well, us, will be the ones actually monitoring the property if it's being used outside the house rules or regulations for the property. And we're the ones that have to, at the end of the day, mandate behavior change or whatever, call the police, whatever it is that has to be done. But my past experience with Airbnb was that not only myself, but the neighbors had done this frequent number of times. We'd complained with Airbnb and being in a lawsuit because we got no response from Airbnb. So in your submissions, I didn't see anywhere whether there's a business plan or how you intend to advertise. You did mention something about 2-day minimum. I don't know what that hurdle rate is in terms of pricing it out. Obviously, financial hurdles is one way to vet your tenants, but a background search would probably supplement quite a bit, and having rules explicit to not smoking, no pets, no parties, no shooting guns, no fireworks, dirt bike riding, that kind of stuff, which actually disrupts the whole entire neighborhood. And I mentioned those specifically because those are the issues we had over the past 40-some years. And I'm the one that actually has to go out there and put in corrective behavior by discussing with them. But I've called the police many times and had the San Bernardino County sheriffs come in there and actually enforce some of these regulations. Now, of course, this wasn't under the rules or mandates of vacation home rental, but I do I act in the best interest of my mom. I'm here to protect her. I work as a lawyer. I also work as a president and CEO of 9 other companies. So I understand the aspects of being entrepreneurial, growing your personal wealth, taking care of your families. I'm not at all against any of that. I actually encourage that. But I can't say that I would encourage it next door to my mom, only because I'm very protective of her and her property. And that's why she's made me a tenant in common here, is to make sure the property does get looked after and gets taken care of. Now, there's a brick wall between both of our properties. I think it's actually on the property line. That's been damaged by a prior tenant. To this day, 20 years later, still hasn't been fixed. So, there's some things in there that, if you and I met personally and had this discussion, I think a lot of this can be mitigated very easily. And again, I'm not against having a rental property next door. What I am against is preventing future behavior that encourages all these things I talked about within the house rules. Because I have to look out for my mother. She's 81 years old, and I'm looking out for her best interest, and I just cannot tolerate any more of that kind of behavior next door. My other next door neighbor used to work for the city of Twin Island Palms. I think he used to be the CPA or at least accountant for the city, and he knows quite well the past experience we've had there, because the noise and the aggregation in the neighborhood was so loud that the neighbor on the other side of us was quite aware of what's going on there as well. So, and you can talk to him. His name is Bill Pike. Happens to live next door to me, and the folks across the street also remember the history there. So all the residents in this area, I know that they've occupied the property probably as long as we have. Bill Pike, I think he became a resident here since 1993, so he's aware of the history going back then. And it's always been a sore point as far as owners renting out that property. And we've had all sorts of people come in, their families, military. Some of these folks, these transient folks, was there for only 2 or 3 weeks. The bottom line is, until this last family was there, we didn't have any peace or quiet. It was that bad. So, if you can assure me that your future tenants are going to be compliant, like the neighbors we had, the ones that you bought the property from, then I don't see a problem. But I'm telling you right now, the moment I see a problem that occurs to this property, you can count on a potential lawsuit, because I'm just not going to tolerate it anymore. I have to look out for the best interest of mom.
Mr. Allen?
I can assure it, I'm going to do the best that I can, both on the front end, like you mentioned, rules in place. I think you mentioned, or you alluded to kind of price point. I think both how we're setting up the house and even the price point, I think by that itself I think kind of has its own kind of selection bias, like a little bit better tenant, keeping to a minimum of 2 days or 3 days of stays. That's better. And like you mentioned, there will be a house rule of no parties, no loud music, all these different things. In general, I think we hope for just, I don't know, relatively mature, like adults, a lot of people that are going to job street.
I need to interrupt here, please. We're just, you
but-
guys are discussing back and forth. Comments are supposed to be directed, excuse me. Comments are supposed to be directed to the chair of the commission. One of the things I want to say, Mr. Allen, is there is a requirement that the vacational rental permit sign be posted where it is visible from the street and it has a contact number. And the person that answers that contact number, whether it's the owner or an agent, has 60 minutes to respond. Period. So they have to take care of any problems that are brought to their attention within 60 minutes. There's also the option of calling the sheriff if the property owner or his agent does not respond. If it is during city business hours, you can also call and speak to the code enforcement officer, and you will get a response. And anytime there is an owner who does not respond in time is a violation that we will take very seriously, and we can impose those sanctions. So there are other things in place. We do have a noise policy in town. We have a night sky ordinance, so people should not be flashing lights or anything else. Like you, I have had rental properties near me, long-term rentals that absolutely had horrible tenants, made our life miserable for 2 or 3 years at a time. So, but there are protections in place. This is a very robust article or code. And so far, in the 2 years that we've had these, we have received 1 complaint, and that was just recently. So I do not know Mr. Gass personally, but we have found that most of the property owners, who particularly those who are going to live in the unit at least part-time, really do try and take care of the property and not be any type of problem to their neighbors. So, are there any other questions or statements either of you wish to make?
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Is Andrew a resident of 29 Palms? And do you have a advertising plan for your property? And what are the price points?
So I'm a resident. I think it was mentioned I needed directed to the chairman, but I couldn't hear that part. But in any case, just generally, I'm a resident part-time. I don't plan to do any advertisement outside of just having it on the Airbnb platform. And as far as
Price points are immaterial, please. Price points are immaterial.
Okay, and that's great because I don't have one currently.
Anything else?
And I think I heard that there's an issue with the property, that there's a 50-minute response.
60 minutes.
Did I get that correctly? And I do not have any contact information for Andrew Gast.
It will be on the sign. It is required to be on the vacation home rental permit sign, which must be attached to a solid structure or a fence and must be visible and readable from the street. It's required on every vacation home rental. That was an item that we put in when this was first drafted to provide protection. So that is one thing you do not have with a long-term rental is you have somebody who is required to respond within 1 hour. And if they don't, there can be action taken against them, and I can guarantee you that with complaints about the property that are brought to our attention will be addressed, and will be addressed swiftly and timely. Okay? I'm going to close the public, excuse me? I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back up here to the dais. Any discussion? Leslie? Max? No. Jason?
No.
No.
Jim? Okay, we have no further discussion. Is there a motion?
I motion that we deny the appeal and approve the vacation home rental permit.
Have a motion and a or is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dixon?
Aye.
Commissioner Krushat?
Aye.
Commissioner Walker?
Aye.
Vice Chair Palahana?
Aye.
Chair Mendoza?
Aye.
It is 5-0 approved to deny the vacation home rental appeal and approve the vacation home rental.
And I would say to both Mr. Allen and Mr. Gast, good luck to both of you, and I hope it becomes a very pleasant relationship, and that we have no issues whatsoever. So thank you very much for participating.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I still do not have any contact information for Andrew Gabb.
It's after, it hasn't been approved yet.
The
Once it's approved, within 30 days after the approval of the permit, 30 days after the approval of the permit, then they have to post that vacation home rental sign. We do not provide it in a letter, it's just posted on the sign out in front of the property after they've been approved.
and they cannot,
And if I want to take this further, who do I address this decision?
you can appeal it to the city council.
And if Mr. Gast is amenable, we could pass his contact information on.
Right.
How about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can give you, it's funny because it's a public, and it's recorded.
Well,
but
we
again,
can do it offline,
Yes,
Mr. Gast.
no
We don't
point in
wanna
doing
make
it right here.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely fine. You can provide my email address and my, my cell phone number. That'd be great.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. All right, that concludes that matter. Thank you both for participating. And now we'll move on to the next item, which is PC 2026 and 39, or 1939 and 2026, site plan and design approval and code interpretation for Pioneer Park and Theater 29.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The reason I mentioned the previous case, which you've actually already reviewed and approved, that was the Theater 29 expansion. Because there's been a slight tweak to it, that site plan where the parking is, I just wanted to make sure all bases were covered, and we brought that previous case back to you as well. So in this case, the applicant is the City of 29 Palms. The request is for approval of site plan and design for a proposed new park, so far currently named Pioneer Park. Some other types of names have been under consideration, and adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. The location is at 73637 Sullivan Road. That's on the southwest corner of Sullivan Road and Adobe Road. There's one parcel that the city owns, and then there are two parcels which would be incorporated into the park, and these are by willing sellers, we call them, who would sell their land to help develop the park. The land use is public for the city-owned portion and service commercial for the willing seller portion. This is a location map here. The red line is actually the property that the city owns, and the two willing seller parcels are the smaller one here along Sullivan Road and a larger one here along Adobe Road. This is the zoning map for the area. The green here designates public, and the purple hatched is the service commercial area. You can see it's pretty much on all sides, with some 1 acre single-family residential zone property to the south and to the east of the park. As I mentioned, there are 3 parcels. The city-owned parcel is about 17.7 acres. One willing seller parcel is 0.9, and the other one's almost 3, so it's going to be a total of about 21.5 acres. There's currently one structure on it, that is the existing community theater. There's access, which is 2 entrances off of Sullivan Road, but there's also access via the unimproved roads in the area. One is Foothill Drive from Adobe, and the other is Yucca Avenue from Sullivan. And these are both unimproved dirt roads. About 3 acres of the 17.7 acre site is currently developed for the theater and parking. So this is some of the pictures. This is a panoramic view of the corner there of Adobe and Sullivan. And then some others looking into the property from the southwest, sort of straight onto the theater building, the existing parking, and then along Adobe Road. You will recall there is actually a Class 1 bike path along this portion of Adobe Road, which will help link the park up to our other bicycle and pedestrian paths in the city. Some more shots of the site. This is kind of like an area that was sort of cleared and graded. It's being used as overflow parking for the theater. Then looking sort of west towards Donnell Hill, northwest from Foothill, and then north of the site. So you can see that most of the property is kind of that desert scrubland type of vegetation. So Pioneer Park is identified as one of the community parks in our general plan of 2012 and also the Parks and Recreation Master Plan of 2008. And I just pulled out a couple of excerpts from those plans when they were talking about and planning for Pioneer Park way back in 2008. So it was described as a center for community and regional activity and to support economic development efforts. To include a full range of recreational uses, particularly those with visitor appeal. And I can show you, demonstrate that the plan really does meet that requirement. Suggested potential uses include an outdoor performance space, fairgrounds, and camping. And again, this was all done in 2008, so 12 years later. This park is eligible for the Prop 68 statewide park program. This is a grant program the city has been successful twice in obtaining. And so with this available funding, that was the reason behind moving forward at this time with designing the park. Just how do we get to this design? There was an extensive community outreach program to design the park. We had several on-site meetings at the theater. We also had sort of a virtual outreach, and then we had a larger open house presentation. Because of COVID, we generally had to keep the crowds small, around 10 and under, so that we were socially distancing. So we had a lot more of the meetings so that we were able to allow more of the citizens to participate. So these are just the many recreational features that will be in the park. The renovation, expansion of the community theater, which you saw before, outdoor stage and amphitheater, multi-use field. So it's being designed as sort of one regulation soccer field, but it can be sort of redesigned into 3 smaller sort of peewee type of soccer fields. Could also be used for football. And then, as we'll see, other type of events. There's walking trails, running loops, children's playground, intergenerational playground, basketball court, tennis court, which currently the city has none. So this would be our first tennis court on city parks. Sand volleyball court, picnic and BBQ pavilion, bike flow course, kite flying hill, and then public art. And then through the middle of it is the Arroyo Nature Trail and Demonstration Garden, which uses the natural drainage patterns of the site. And I got an image to help sort of depict that. Major support amenities, these are defined in the grant, so these are kind of the non-recreational components that would go into the grant, and they include restrooms, parking, and landscaping. Under parking, the theater requires 40 spaces. but we've included an additional 100 for park use, and then of course there's the ability to have overflow parking off of Yucca Avenue. So this is the overall park concept plan. I think I flashed it one time before you guys before. Just go into a little bit more detail here. This is an aerial view of the park. Not everybody can read 2D maps, so it always helps to have kind of a 3D perspective. But this is the proposed renovation to Theater 29, the parking along Sullivan, which would be expanded. This is the outdoor stage and amphitheater here. The multi-use field here behind it. The children's playground, intergenerational playgrounds there to the west, and the basketball court and tennis court there, sand volleyball behind. Actually, I think the next slide kind of helps show the labels here. The running loop, which would go around the multi-purpose field, and then the arroyo, which kind of crisscrosses the site here. There along Adobe Road, we would have the bike flow course and some additional parking as well. So one thing that is different about this park, unlike Lucky and Not Sky, which are great parks, but they are pretty much grass from end to end. So in this case, we took a lot more environmentally sensitive approach to designing this park. So a big portion of it will still be, or will still remain in sort of that desert landscape, with really the grass being confined to this multi-purpose field. We'll supplement it with other types of desert landscaping. So we use the natural drainage of the site here to sort of control the runoff from the site, meet our stormwater management requirements, but also kind of one of the innovative things that our designers did was to include these check dams along the way, which would kind of retain the water in certain locations and allow for some of that natural vegetation to grow in those areas. This is a perspective of the Arroyo Nature Trail, what it looked like. And then this is the perspective of the amphitheater. And again, a kind of an innovative thing, design aspect of this site is we have the stage and amphitheater that could be used for sort of smaller, more intimate events. But if necessary, and we had a larger event, let's say a concert or maybe a large play that the theater is doing, then that could just sort of spill over to the multi-purpose field. So it serves several functions in this plan. I won't say too much about the building plans because you all saw those before, but essentially the existing theater building gets converted into additional lobby and concession and office area, with mainly the addition being the stage portion, the green rooms, and the dressing rooms. So that would allow for the audience area to be expanded and also to incorporate the ADA seating as part of the theater. This theater addition would have a fly loft, which is what kind of the box-like structure is that would be attached to the building. But that would allow for sets to be lowered onto the stage. And again, this is just kind of an elevation here from the architect of the building, and the side elevations. And then this is a perspective or rendering. So on the environmental side, initial study was conducted on the CEQA. The property, because of its size, did not qualify for an exemption. So a lot of the commercial, industrial type of work projects that happen in the city do qualify, but not in this case. So all the standard environmental factors were studied. The study was circulated as required for 30-day comment period. sent to the state clearinghouse, as well as our own list of local agency. We keep a list of about 30 agencies, everyone from sort of our neighboring jurisdictions to Burtech to Edison, SoCalGas. We received no comments. We did publish our notice of intent on November 11, 2020. And then the other thing this property is subject to is the AB 52 tribal consultation. We did have 2 tribes that expressed interest in consulting. Those were the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians as well as San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. And so in the initial study, the mitigation measures are intended to mitigate the impacts to less than significant. So we had 3 environmental factors which were potentially significant: cultural, biological, and geologic. Of cultural resource being kind of the most sensitive one. And so after several meetings with the tribes, both in person and through web meetings, we came up with sort of this staged or phased type of mitigation measures. And the first would be the use of cadaver dogs on the site. Because of the site's location, proximity to the Chemehuevi Cemetery, there was concern, however remote, there could potentially be remains. This is a technique that the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians has used before. And so we agreed to bring them in for this mitigation measure. And then after that, something San Manuel had requested was the shovel test pits. So these are just areas sort of scattered throughout the site where there's probably the greatest potential that there might be cultural resources there. And then thirdly, based on those 2 first steps, potentially monitoring during excavation. For biological resources, we did all the studies, desert tortoise study, owl study, all of that. There's biologists just recommending that we go through this again before construction. And then geologic is kind of the standard geotechnical report along with a survey from paleontologists. So that's kind of the basis of the site plan and the CEQA review. One last kind of element that we needed is really one on interpretation. The chairman brought up a good point when the building was going through review about, how do we treat the facade? Is it a painted sign? Is it not? And so we kind of looked at that feature, and specifically I looked elsewhere in town where we have the 29 kind of our identifier, our emblem. Obviously there's the water tower, which proved a couple years ago. There's our sculpture there along Route 62. And in my opinion, this is a facade treatment. It's an architectural feature. It's not a sign that's advertising a business. It's really, really promoting the theater. And the city for that. So the idea was when we create this sort of 2-9, talk about styling it as some sort of mural. So making it a little bit more artistic in nature, kind of like the mini murals that we have in the city. But I want to get concurrence on that interpretation because obviously this is something that could come back as a question. So staff's recommendation is to approve the site plan and design, to adopt the mitigating negative declaration and issue a notice of determination, and seek concurrence with Community Development Director's opinion on the facade treatment for the building. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any of those.
Any questions from staff or for staff? I'm sorry.
Yes. Mr. Clark, I know I already asked you this question. I'm asking it again for the benefit of my colleagues here.
Okay.
And I know it wasn't in here, but it's out of curiosity. How big of a grant are we going to be asking for? What is it going to cost for us to accomplish this?
We're going to be
project?
seeking the maximum,
Okay.
Which the program tops out at $8.5 million.
8.5, okay.
We were hoping to come in under that, but in the AB 52 consultation, some of those mitigation measures kept sort of pushing up. The city will be making a matching contribution of $300K.
Okay,
And that is to make the road improvements along the Sullivan frontage, including the parcel that would be added to it, and then turning the corner and making frontage improvements on Adobe Road up to where that property stops. There's the parcels in the middle that we don't own yet, and so we would make improvements up to
And
that
then-
point.
and then the other thing is, again, I'm asking this, I know we've discussed it for my colleagues. There's no chance that when you apply for the grant, they come back and only give you a partial.
I hadn't heard of that.
Okay.
Okay, I hadn't heard of that.
So I mean, it's not like they could come back and say, okay, we're gonna give you $4 million, and we're supposed to then decide, okay, which do we do out of the project?
Right. No, I haven't heard of that. Most of the agencies that are awarding the Prop 68 funds make sure there's a little bit of kitty
Okay.
sort of left in funding, just in case there maybe was an issue with another project that got funded before.
And then
But they do try to get it really close to use all the funds.
All right, and I concur that the 29 is a artistic and architectural feature on the building. Thank you.
Any other
Chairman, that's all
questions?
I have.
Max?
No questions.
Jason?
No questions.
I have no questions, but a comment to clarify something.
Okay.
We've had tennis courts in this town for years.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, they got converted to basketball courts. So those of us who played tennis have not had tennis courts for, what, 25 years now, I think? So, yes, but there were tennis courts
At one time, yeah. The other thing I failed to mention, Mr. Chairman, was the kite flying hill. So this was another kind of innovative idea from our designers, and that is, typically when you do a project like this, you want your excavation all to balance, between your cut and fill type of thing. Keep it on site as much as possible rather than have to truck it off. So in this case, we realized that we would have kind of a little bit more cut than needed, and so the idea was to sort of mound all of this up and create a hill with it. So another good idea from our.
I plan to use the hill.
And because of its position, it also could be an extension to the multi-use field as another viewing area for
Right,
the stage,
yeah.
so.
And every 10 years when it snows, you can slide down it.
Okay. Is there a motion
I'll
to approve the site plan?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the site plan as designed, adopt the mitigated negative declaration under CEQA, and file a notice of determination, and concur that the community director or development director implement the building facial treatment as a architectural feature.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dixon?
Aye.
Commissioner Krushat?
Aye.
Commissioner Walker?
Aye.
Vice Chair Pahana?
Aye.
Chair Mendoza?
Aye.
5-0 approved.
Okay, very good. Discussion and potential action items? Anything from the commission? Community Development Director updates.
Okay, I will try to be brief and concise. Project Phoenix News, as you can all see, the major excavation is now underway. So all the undergrounding, all the utilities are done, and so this is really the first step in the site work. And so things will move a lot quicker from here on out, because once the rough grading is done, we'll go back and start doing the finer grading to set the curbs and gutters and things like that. So things will actually start rising out of the ground here for now. I know it's been a year of construction. Utilities are not the sexy part, but they're the necessary part. And so those are all done, and so you'll see some real progress on it. We also, this week, will be opening the bids for the buildings, and so far they're looking good. So like I say, if those come in as projected, we can go back and make some enhancements to the sites that we talked about. We do have a new submittal to the Planning Community Development Office, the Planning Office, and that is a grocery outlet. That is for a 16,000 square foot grocery store on the northeast corner of Route 62 and Encilia. We have been working with them for some time, but as you all know, I do not make a public announcement until we get an official application and it's deemed complete. And so that did happen since the last meeting. So we're processing that now as well. A little bit about our Citizen Serve implementation. As I mentioned before, code enforcement is online now. So you can go to our website and be able to file a code enforcement complaint online. Now we're now working on the different modules for planning. Both Diane and Shelley were on the call this afternoon, working on the latest set, but we pretty much have got film permits, temporary use permits, sign permits, encroachment permits, all done, and I think we're moving to lot line adjustments and things like that. Eventually, we'll be moving to the more complex ones like site plan and design review, but we started on the easy ones first. And then just a note for the two commissioners that have expiring terms in March, Commissioner Cruciat and Commissioner Paahana. We are required to advertise, the seats, and we'll be doing that soon. So we wanted to let you know that you have until February 11th to submit a letter stating you're interested in reappointment or not. Okay, and then the advertisement will close shortly after that. And then City Council will meet, and I think the second meeting in February to make the appointment. And then the members would be seated in March. So.
As we used to say in the Army, it would behoove both of you to submit your letters seeking reappointment.
And that's all I have. I'm keeping it short this
Okay,
evening.
great. No study session? Does anybody want to go home? So moved. Let's go home.